Hi everybody, welcome back. So I wanted to come back and do another video to give you a little bit more information. I know that I talked about two procedures that I had done recently when I went to go see the fertility doctor, and I wanted to give you more information about both of them. So the one that I got done on Wednesday was the HSG dye test, and then on Thursday I got the hysteroscopy. So I wanted to give you more information about both of those, and I might show you a picture if I get a little bit tied up in how to explain both of them. So the HSG, we'll start with that one. So I did that one first, and in this one they put dye into your uterus and it fills up. It's a bunch of dye. I looked after the procedure and I could see the nurse after she was done. She emptied all of the dye. It was this rust colored dye into a bowl that looked kind of like a dog bowl. So they fill all of that into your uterus, and the doctor is looking on a screen. So there's an x-ray machine. You're laying on this bed and there's an x-ray machine over your uterus, and the doctor is on another screen and he can see everything that's happening. So the point of the HSG is to see that the dye flows through your uterus and your fallopian tubes properly. So that tells them if there's any blockages or any cysts or anything that's not working properly. So he said everything looked fantastic, which is a good thing. However, the whole procedure was awful. It hurt really, really bad. I would say on a scale of 0 to 10, it was probably an 8 or even a 9. And I instantly, the second that he put the dye in there, I could feel intense cramping. It was awful. It did not feel good. And after the procedure was over, it was about 2-3 minutes long. But after the procedure was over, I felt so lightheaded. I felt so dizzy. I had intense cramping, and the nurse was so nice. She got me some crackers and juice and let me lay down for a little bit longer. And then I started to feel better, and I went into the bathroom and she gave me a pad and some wipes to clean the blood and some of the dye. And you can't use a tampon, you can't use a dildo or a vibrator, and you can't have sex with the HSG, you can't have sex or do any of those things for 2 to 3 days. And then so it was time to go. I put my clothes back on and I met my husband. They didn't allow him to come back with me, and I'm not sure if part of that is because of the whole COVID-19 thing and they didn't want more people in the room. But what the nurse told us was that because they use x-ray, that he couldn't be in there with me. So I met my husband after I got dressed, and I had really intense cramping for about half an hour on the car ride home. So during the procedure, my cramping was maybe an 8 or a 9. Then following the procedure, my cramping was at a 5 or a 6 the whole ride home, almost all of the whole ride home. So we live about an hour from the fertility clinic. And I would say almost that whole hour, or at least a half an hour, it was about a 5 or 6. And then for the rest of the night, it was at maybe a 3 or a 4. But it was manageable after that point. But in the beginning, it was awful. I thought I was being a really big baby, but I've talked with other people from different fertility groups, and they've told me that it hurts like hell for them too. So this isn't to scare you, just to help you prepare and know what to expect with an HSG dye test. So we'll go on to the hysteroscopy. So the hysteroscopy again, this one was done in the same office, in the same fertility clinic. My husband couldn't go in again, and I started to almost have a panic attack. I was so nervous because just the day before I had the HSG test done, or the HSG dye, I guess, test, and it was awful. So I started to panic. I struggled with anxiety. I started to panic. I started to have a panic attack. I was almost crying, and I wanted my husband in there, but they again said no. They said that it was because the room was too small and the procedure was very quick. But I think that part of that is because of the COVID-19 stuff. So with the hysteroscopy, the doctor there's 3 parts to it. First, they cleanse the uterus, and they use the same dye as the HSG, and it hurts, but this time it's not as bad because they don't use as much. So first they cleanse it, they use the dye, they clean stuff out. Then the first thing they do is a transvaginal ultrasound. and the doctor is able to look at your ovaries and can see your fallopian tubes and just looks in there and takes some images. The second thing they do is they use a camera, and this camera has a little light at the end of it, and so they insert that into your uterus, and it kind of hurts a little bit. It's uncomfortable, but it's not awful at this point. And they take more images and they check for fibroids and cysts and blockages again, to make sure everything looks good and healthy. And then the third thing they do, which is awful, this is the awful part of the hysteroscopy, they take a biopsy. So I don't know what the tool looks like because I had my eyes closed again because of anxiety, but they use a tool and they take a biopsy of the inside of your uterus. And I literally screamed at this point. It was awful. The good thing is that it's very quick. So maybe 10 seconds of really sharp, intense pain. And then it subsides. So the hysteroscopy is a little bit different because it's super intense pain, but then subsides very quickly. Whereas the HSG, maybe not as intense, still sucks, not as intense, but lasts longer, and a lot more cramping. But I will say with the hysteroscopy, I've noticed some bleeding. So that first day I had some mild bleeding that kind of subsided. I don't know if you guys can hear my dogs. They're barking downstairs, but so if I'm distracted, that's why. But the bleeding kind of slowed down after the first day. But then I noticed that on day 2 after the procedure, I had more dark, heavier blood. And I'm not sure why, but other people have told me that could be normal. And from what I've read, it could also mean that the hysteroscopy has caused me to start my menstrual cycle. So I hope that's not true, because then that would mean that we would have to wait a whole other cycle to try medications and to start the process of IUI. So I hope that that's not the case and that maybe it's just more leftover bleeding and shedding. But I will keep you guys informed and let you know how it goes. So overall, if I had to compare the two, I think that I would prefer the hysteroscopy, the second one, over the HSG, because that was very intense, very uncomfortable, and lasted a lot longer. This one was very sharp pain, but very quick pain. And then it was over. So I hope that that clears things up. If you have any questions about either of the procedures, I would be happy to answer them. Thanks, guys.